welcome to New York Comic Con 2018.
Dude, it's really good to see you again.
It's good to see you
It's been
too,
a
man.
while. It's been a while.
Fun fact is you're like one of my first interviews like ever. And this was like back in the day when I came over to your place in the Grove and we just shot the shit about wrestling.
I know. It was an interesting time. I mean, I feel like the internet wasn't it wasn't taken seriously back then in the way it is now, right? I feel like now kind of the old guards really just like kind of bowed down to it, and a lot of them have just gone like, I don't get it, never gonna get it. Half of them have quit. Some of them have tried to kind of like.
But that was until you broke the internet with a lot of your videos, because that Power Ranger film that you did, whoo boy, that definitely broke the internet.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. It was an interesting time in my life. It was interesting. It was an interesting time. I wasn't. Let's go wait for that.
Oh, they can't hear that. Oh, that creaking.
Oh, they can't?
Nah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was just kind of an interesting time in my life. Yeah, just an interesting time.
Reflection. Now, I do gotta ask you, Castlevania, man. That's amazing. And I'm so happy that you picked up and started doing that property, because I remember old Castlevania. I'm sure you remember it too. The Nintendo little cartoon they used to do with
Captain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Captain N, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Captain N and Mega Man and all those guys.
Yeah, but like in that one, like Mega Man was green in Captain N. Yeah, he was like green.
Now you pretty much put video game franchises, I think, in a cinematic form or even television style form, back on the map with Castlevania, because it's quite amazing. But I want to ask you about some other things like Witcher, because I know that that's now a thing, and I know that video games have struggled to find their footing when it comes to the big screen adaptations. Why do you think that is?
I mean, there's not really a blanket answer, and I think there's a few factors at play, right? One is definitely like for a while there was definitely a technological aspect to it, right? I mean, until CGI got to a place where you could really like create these worlds. I mean, let me put it this way: Infinity War, probably the best movie I've ever seen at this point.
Really, ever?
I can't watch a movie more than twice. I mean, if I loved a movie, I've seen it twice.
Sure.
There's something about it just because, it's a story. I'm like, all right, I've heard the story. I've seen the story. All right, move on. Show me something else, right? Infinity War, I've seen 11 times.
Wow.
I've seen it 11 times.
That's crazy.
Like, I just keep watching it over and over and over and over again.
It's not like a short movie. It's not like a short watch. It's a pretty long movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. All the, like, when Thor enters the battlefield, but it opens with Stormbreaker, like, decimating, and it's just all these awesome moments. I think a big part of it is that film would not have been possible without not just the advent of CGI, but also where CGI is today, due to all the advancements in it, right? Even the process of making films.
Sure.
It used to be more of a craft. Directors used to be more craftsmen, right? It was more of a physical activity.
Sure.
Live action movies are starting to emulate Pixar movies in terms of their development process.
That's really interesting that you said that, because I've been kind of noticing a small trend like that as well in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I do have to ask is, just speaking of video game movies, Snowpiercer. Are you familiar with?
I love Snowpiercer. Yeah.
So, to me, that is.
I tried to get involved in Snowpiercer.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was doing this movie back in the day called Corsica '72. It was a gangster movie set in Corsica, in the island of Corsica, and I sent it to Park. I sent the script, and the script was written by the dudes that wrote the last Bond movies, Purvis and Wade.
Sure.
And I sent the script to Park Chan-wook, who did Old Boy and all those movies, and Park signed on. And then next thing I knew, I was spending some time in Korea, and then I got to know the Korean filmmakers, and all of a sudden I heard about this movie called Snowpiercer. I'm like, dude, this is awesome! It's just Dread on a train. This is exactly what I need to be doing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, the reason
Weird tangent.
No, hey, I would love to see your touch on it, and you know you have your own the bootleg universe, which I love, so maybe we could revisit that world sometime.
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of, yeah.
I think you were going to say in the works. Hopefully, I was hoping, across my fingers, you're going to say it's in the works. Snowpiercer bootleg universe in the works. You're giving me a look right now of like.
I mean, there's a Snowpiercer TV show coming out.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. The reason I brought that up though is because it is like a side-scroller video game, and I think that's,
Absolutely.
It's that I'm not the first person to make that reference. It was Jordan who actually is doing the Metal Gear Solid film, but it really is because I think that a lot of video game movies can kind of learn from that. And I just want to talk about that because I heard you have an opinion on Witcher that's coming out. Is that somebody said I heard through the grapevine?
Oh, I'm super excited to see it. I'm super excited to see it. You know, it's an interesting world. You know what I find interesting about The Witcher is it's like based on books, but then these video games came out and are way more popular than the books, right?
Level.
So I wonder how the author emotionally feels about that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, so you did the novelization of these video games. How does that feel? And he's like, because you know he hears that all the time.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And there has to be a lot of folks that think that it was a video game before it was a novelization. So yeah, I'm sure that that's some of the case. I do have to ask you something because the bootleg universe gave me probably the close to say the perfect Venom that I wanted to see. Venom just came out on just the other day. Did you see it? Have a chance to see it yet?
No. I mean, I haven't. You know, I started off just being like yourself, a massive fan, and somehow I now have a career doing this stuff.
A very successful one, by the way.
And it's weird. Like I haven't even seen the Punisher TV show.
Oh, really?
No, I haven't seen that either. I have a really hard time. Now I don't know what it is. I mean, it's not like I have beef or anything. I'm excited that these things exist. I'm excited that these things have fan bases. It really gives me a reference point to talk to people, right? Like, but like I'm happy that the iconography that you and I grew up loving is now mainstream and it's not this like niche thing. It's wonderful thing. For some reason, I just like don't go see them. I don't know why. I don't know why.
In Venom's case, you may have made a better choice on that one because I wasn't the biggest fan of it. But, you know, the bootleg universe version to me, because I wanted to see that. Like, I wanted to see that Eddie Brock. I wanted to see what you did with it was so brilliant to me. I mean, I really, really liked it. Now, I know that earlier that you...
Well, I work with, you know, on the bootlegs, I try to work with... collaborators on it. So on the Venom one, Joe Lynch, I try to work with people who are either fans of the property or fans of the genre that I'm trying to put the property in. Right? It's one or the other. So with the case of Punisher: Dirty Laundry, you know, I always looked at the Punisher as a character that's really he's a throwback to a Western. Sure. Right? He's like a guy from a Western who's just being put in an urban setting, in a city setting, but you look at the beats of the most cliched Western you could see. You know, guy going into a new town, sees lawlessness. Okay, that's how Dirty Laundry opens. Then he goes into the saloon to have a drink. That's going to talk to Ron Perlman and, you know, having the yoo-hoo, and then he acts against, you know. So it's like. So that was that team that I put together was people that weren't necessarily Punisher fans, but these were like Western people. These were all people that would complain to me, be like, you know what we need? We need a great Western. I'm like, absolutely. Let's just set it in a city and call it the Punisher.
You know what? That's
or actually not have the Punisher. Just put a T-shirt at the end.
That's very true. That's interesting that you say that because I've noticed that a lot of superhero movies nowadays are kind of doing this thing where they're kind of mashing genres with the superhero genre. I mean, we're seeing it a lot lately.
Yeah.
And I do want to ask you, back to Venom real quick, I do want to ask you, though, what are some of the essential ingredients that you think are necessary for creating, like, a good Venom on screen? Because you did it well.
It's a great question. I don't think you can necessarily tell a Venom story through Venom's point of view. I think that's red flag number one, right? He's not really an anti-hero. right? We have lots of anti-heroes in comics. Punisher's an anti-hero.
Sure.
At times, Wolverine's an anti-hero. Venom is something completely different. So if you're trying to tell a story from his point of view, it's not really going to work unless you're really doubling down on the fact that he's an unreliable narrator.
Sure. It's very interesting you said that because Todd McFarlane was in here yesterday and pretty much said the same thing.
Really?
Yeah. He said that
Dope.
there's a lot of anti-heroes out there, but he always created Venom to be a villain. And telling it from that point of view is obviously a lot different. But he didn't feel necessarily, I don't want to say an ownership, he didn't feel like he should tell anybody what to do, but that was his opinion on it. So I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think... Yeah, you really just need Adi Shankar to Kevin Feige the shit out of the Spider-Verse.
I'm with that. I'm on board with that. If you wanted to take a crack at any of those Spider characters in the MCU, who would they be?
I mean, all of them. I would Kevin Feige the shit out of that, and I'd literally be competing head-on with the MCU.
Really?
Yeah.
Sony.
I go big.
Sony. Avi Arad, you heard it first. Get him on board, man. I'd love to see what you could do with Kraven the Hunter. You know what I mean?
All of them. I mean, Kraven's a great character. I mean, Spider-Man has the best rogues gallery.
Rivaled to Batman, but I do agree with you.
And here's the okay. So you're gonna do a Morbius. I heard that there's a Morbius movie in the works, right?
There is.
But it's weird. Then you got to go to Marvel and or you got to go to Disney and make a deal. Make a deal to be able to use Blade. Because you can't do Morbius without Blade, yo.
I think a lot of people felt this. I agree with you 100%. I feel a lot of people felt the same way about Eddie Brock and Peter Parker using Spider-Man. But I totally
And it
agree
didn't
with
need to be an origin story. I mean, now that I'm thinking, again, I know nothing. I haven't watched the film. I try to avoid all this stuff now. But now that I'm thinking about it, like it actually seems pretty irrational to me that you would do a Venom origin story, because his origin is actually not interesting at all. His origin is so defined by his loathing for Spider-Man. So it's almost like you have to jump and ignore the origin and just have Venom exist and have Miles Morales exist. You know what I mean? Like put him in the Miles Morales universe, or I mean, Eddie Brock really is Venom. I mean, like, yeah, there's Agent Venom and stuff, but maybe for another generation. That's the thing. Yeah, this is just another situation where I'm just going to be like dropping ideas, and then 5 years later it's going to be like, oh, all the things you were talking about 5 years ago or short films you made are now like movies.
Yeah, I mean, give us the Kurt Connors like pre-Lizard before he comes the Lizard story. I think that could be an interesting story too.
Right.
Fun story to tell.
Right, and the symbiote. The symbiote's a weird one, because yeah, it's like Venom in a lot of ways, right? Once you remove Spider-Man and Carnage from the equation, he's unfairly overpowered. He's literally unfairly overpowered,
Sure.
right? So you need someone that can stand up to him, like a Captain America or something, right? Where you can.
It's somebody that's a formidable foe.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise he's just this overpowered dude. Or put him in like a detective story where Eddie Brock has to rescue some children, and yeah, the fact that he's got these Venom powers is great, but his investigative journalism background is more helpful. Something like that. Again, I'm just riffing. I don't really think about Venom because I try to not think about Marvel.
You should be on Sony's radar for a lot of these films, let me just say right now, because I want to talk about, because I did see you very briefly at Morphicon, and your Power Rangers was amazing. I really liked it. I'm a big fan of it. Saban, on the other hand, I don't know. But you know what? You broke the internet with that. I do have to ask you, did you see the 2017 movie?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Okay, it just wasn't. Okay, how do I say this? I don't want to be that guy who like shows up and starts trashing other people's things, and I like because it's just so tough to make anything, and so many man hours and woman hours go into this. And it's tough. It's like a backbreaking process. I literally have like premature, gray hairs because of some of the stress I've gone through, and just living the life of an artist. That film wasn't for me. That said, I don't think I or you were the intended audience.
Sure.
It was made for kids. It was meant to reintroduce Power Rangers to a whole new generation, right? Which to me didn't really make sense because everyone knows about Power Rangers. I mean, it is kind of one of those ubiquitous things, even if it's the butt of a joke.
It's a pop culture thing at this point now. There's a reason why it's been on 25 years.
Absolutely. So I think again, origin story, mistake. Right, it's a mistake. It was cut, copy, paste of pieces of other things that we had seen before, right? And then the iconography that we've all come to know and love, even though it is viewed through, even though I know there's people who think it's corny and stuff, it's still the iconography. Don't change the fucking iconography. I don't know if I can swear, but don't change the iconography.
You can.
And again, it didn't need to be Pacific Rim. It didn't need to be like giant Zord battles,
sure.
Right? But it's almost like a bunch of executives got in a room and went, "Oh, teenagers with attitude, got it. We're gonna make them emo teenagers with like real teenager problems." But the reality is, like, one, those aren't real teenager problems, and two, of today, and two, those like. That line was always a misnomer. Like,
sure.
They weren't teenagers with attitude. They were teenagers that did really well in school, were wonderful members of their community, and did karate in their free time.
We talk about that all
the time. The only
right?
guy that had attitude was Tommy, and that was because he was because he had a candle that was like burning out his powers. So like, and he was justified. So the little tinge of attitude comes from Tommy.
Sure.
And that's not really attitude. You throw like Tommy in the MCU. And he's like a Boy Scout.
He's the nicest guy. He's Captain America Jr. If you had your crack at following up the sequel, though, what would you want to do? Let's freestyle about that a little bit.
Of a movie?
Yeah.
Like, does it have to be live action?
No. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Now that it's in the hands of Hasbro, I don't know why there isn't a live action. Which, I mean, I saw what you did with the Dread.
Okay, so what I would do. I think Kyle Higgins has done a wonderful job with the Shattered Grid.
I agree with
thing,
you.
Right? So I would really just lean into that aspect of it. Use it to, and it has to be a sequel to the film that came out. You said.
I mean,
let's just say it has to be a sequel.
Okay.
Or no.
No, let's hear your version of, because I like this like little pitch idea here.
Right, because I just do that for fun, and
yeah.
then it ends up becoming a thing, and I'm like, oh, cool.
And then you're gonna get all the tweets being like, hey, could you just make this real quick, like.
Yeah, so I would lean into the Shattered Grid, open up the idea of the multiverse, Rangers from across dimensions, the multiverse, right? But I think there's a really amazing opportunity here, right, where we've never really explored where the Zords came from, right? And two, so we've never explained where the Zords come from. So what if the Zords are really from another planet, and they come from one planet, and that planet's called Cybertron, and they're really just like these devices where because you know how the robots and Transformers are basically sentient?
Yeah,
what if they're really just humans who then took their minds and put it in the cloud, but the cloud was a robot?
Sure.
So they're basically like cocoons for humans to transfer their consciousness into. And these are early, so basically the Zords are basically the Dinobots. And they're just early Transformers before the consciousness. So they're really vessels for the Power Rangers to upload their consciousness into. I'm leaning too heavily into the consciousness thing because I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me.
Oh, it makes sense to me too.
And then you also set up the idea that now, like Godzilla happens, and the world has to like defend itself against one guy. Like people don't just chill out. Like take Pacific Rim. Like people freak out about this stuff,
Sure.
right? And you can kind of lean into this idea that there's this private military force that's been constructed to take these out, like called G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
And but they're really like, WTF, we can't fight these giant monsters that keep appearing. We don't know where they're coming from. Oh, by the way, there's somehow like these kids that, so it's almost like that Ultimate Spider-Man thing,
Sure.
where Peter Parker had these powers, but Nick Fury's like, hey, we're tracking you.
That's what I think that Lightspeed Rescue, a version of Power Rangers,
Yeah.
which is like their first responders, I think that would fit perfect with the G.I. Joe universe.
Absolutely.
I think you just created the Allspark for the Hasbro universe. See what we did there? That's actually a really good idea. I feel like that's something that you should have a meeting about with somebody, not just a guy interviewing you, but an actual meeting with somebody. Is it something that you've had a meeting about with somebody?
I did get emails from Hasbro. Yes, I can say that.
Really?
Yeah, I've talked to Hasbro, but look, I don't want to start any like weird rumor or anything.
Rumors already started at this
And rumors
point,
are started. Yeah, rumors. There's always rumors about me. I've said this a few times in the past, and I feel like it's gotten misinterpreted as maybe me being, call it ungrateful or looking down, and I'm not. I've seen what Hollywood has done to a lot of people.
Sure.
Significantly older than me. I was able to break in at like a super young age, right? A lot of the things we're talking about, like, they happened before I was even 30, and I wasn't in a place where I could mentally handle a lot of the pressures of these like big studio corporate jobs, because they become jobs at a certain point.
Absolutely.
Right? And I had to, and I kept saying I don't want to sell out. Really, what I was saying is I can't handle this. This is really crazy. There's a lot of politics going on. I know how to like express myself and make my own thing, and that's why Netflix has been such a great partner.
Sure.
Because, like Castlevania, they gave us complete 100% autonomy.
I was actually going to ask about that, about the relationship with Netflix and how much leeway you have with Castlevania.
100%. It's completely autonomous. I mean, they tweeted at me after the Power Rangers short came out. I went in for a meeting, and they're like, whatever you want to do, blank check. I'm like, that's crazy.
Wow.
But what's been dope is Kanye West reached out to me earlier in the year, like top of the year, and he's been kind of mentoring me through some of this.
Really?
Yeah, which has been really, really, just really wonderful, because I haven't had like an adult in my life who like is an artist, who's a successful artist that also navigates like the suits and the business people on a very high level. Mm-hmm. I didn't know who to like ask or who to talk to when these things were happening. Like, every time you drop something or a show comes out and it goes viral, people are talking about it. Your phone starts ringing. People start calling you in for meetings, and it's kind of intimidating, right? Because you're like, I'm still a kid, like, and
which I'm sure he was too, and experienced a lot of the same things early in his career.
Yes. And it's just been, it's been very, very great. And, he's, in a lot of ways, he's almost given me a blueprint in the sense that, his company Yeezy. He's got a company Yeezy. They're in fashion. And it's not like Air Jordans where Nike licensed Michael Jordan's name to make. He's actually designing shoes.
Sure.
He's in so many different sectors that we don't even know about. I mean, he's not a rapper. I mean, he is a very successful rapper, but he's not just a rapper.
Yeah.
He's kind of like Howard Hughes.
Oh, that's an interesting.
He's a lot like Howard Hughes. Yeah, and I mean that in the best way possible, and just again having that example, of how to do things, how to navigate some of this, has just been wonderful, and it's prepared me.
That's awesome.
Very well.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. I'm sure.
Yeah, and I don't really talk about it because it's not. I didn't need him to like make me like famous or something. That wasn't the thing. It was more like I felt like maybe I was drowning because I kept getting these opportunities and maybe didn't necessarily know how to navigate them because, well, it's really fucking complicated, right?
So it's more guidance than anything else, it seems like.
Yeah. It's a guidance, also having a good example, a good role model, right? I'm a complete outsider to Hollywood. I'm an outsider to America. I immigrated here by myself when I was 16, right? The first image I saw 2 days after I landed here was 9/11, Osama bin Laden on the TV screen being like, and people being like, fuck that guy. And no one said this to me necessarily, but I all of a sudden went like, oh man, I kind of look like that guy. And it immediately like made me withdrawn. And then I finished off my last 2 years of high school. I went to college. And then immediately when I was in college, like my end of winter quarter going into my spring quarter, I was misdiagnosed with cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I had all this trauma from these things that were just unresolved. And that's why I had, like my response to this wasn't to go deal with it. It wasn't to go talk to a therapist. It was to start creating stuff, to start doing stuff. I was like, I need it. And I felt like this midlife crisis almost. That where you're staring death in the face.
Sure.
Like I felt that at 18. So I constantly felt like I was running out of time. And I had to do everything possible before it was too late. And I think the last year and a half has been the first time I've been able to really just pull back and go, why do you do the things that you do? How can you actually leave a positive impact on the world? Using the talents that I have.
Sure.
Because, for a while I didn't necessarily even realize that I had talents.
Well, you definitely have talents, and you're putting them to good use. And I'm happy to hear that you have guidance and somebody with experience similar to what you had. That's very cool, actually.
Yeah. It's been it's really it felt like a blessing. And it was weird. It was on the that school I went to. So I was at a school. So I transferred to a new school in order to move to America, in order to be able to be part of this wonderful country, which is like free and open, and it's like an open, thing of ideas. And I realized even as a kid, I was like, if I move there, this is I get to be creative. But I didn't have the greatest experience at the school because I show up, I'm pretty much the only brown kid there.
Sure.
And then 9/11 happens, and it was, a lot of it was in my head, but still it was, as a kid you process things differently. But what was really nuts is on the same day, at the top of this year, on the same day, I got an email from that high school that I have no contact with.
Really?
I got an email saying, hey, your 15-year reunion's this year. Are you coming? Because we'd like to have you speak to some of the students there. And then Kanye called me. That, like, literally the same day. And I'm like, wow, this is really crazy. Like this is a
kismet?
Yeah, it's like it was a blessing. It was a blessing. It was like, you've been through this journey, you went through some stuff, and now you're coming out of it.
Yeah, I'm happy that you're on the right side of that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I know that they want me to wrap it up, but I do have to ask one final question, which we kind of touched on a little bit here, and because I'd love to continue on this conversation, hopefully in LA.
Mm-hmm.
We can
Yeah,
set something
absolutely.
up. But so, confirm or deny, there at least has been talks with Hasbro and you for something.
I can confirm that I have emails from Hasbro about something.
That's good enough for me.
I guess, yeah, we
It's
can,
good
we
enough
can
for me.
say that.
I'm excited to see everything that you do because you're doing it at a high level, you're doing a great job, and you're paying a lot of service to me as the fan, but also doing it in such a creative way, which I latch on to, man. And you have this great energy about you ever since I met you. And I actually want to thank you because if it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't even be sitting here.
Dude, you're a wonderful interviewer.
I'm over it.
Because
I know.
you're really good at you actually listen, right? You like listen to what the person's saying and you like respond. and you're like actually processing. Like I can see you processing what I'm saying, and it's not just jumping to the next question. It's
Sure.
it's really like, it's great to have a conversation. I mean, I literally just deep dived into like crazy like how I had cancer and how I like people thought I was Osama bin Laden. Like you know what I mean? You got that out of me, and I wouldn't have just kind of shared that
Well,
with anyone. So
happy you did, and believe
Yeah.
me, there's many follow-ups that I'd like to do with you, mainly because honestly, I just love to pick your brain. Because I remember even on wrestling, we haven't even touched wrestling, but even with that level, that we both had a fondness for. But man, I can't wait to see you again back in LA. Thank you
Dude.
so much for stopping by.
Dude.